Welcome one, welcome all back to CCG Esports for one of the biggest weekends of League of Legends amateur action you could come to find. I'm Slayer, joined by Bonfire, Slayfire here, going to take you through the weekend of open qualifiers with the number 5 newly minted 5th seeded CCG squad. And Bonfire, this roster certainly met expectations the last open qualifiers round, but they've reloaded an artillery for this second one to make a real big push for that promotion tournament.
Yeah, there's some big names on this roster, coaching staff included, and luckily behind the scenes survived a scare. We are getting the normal roster, so this is everything I think everybody wanted to see. And this is a team that's looking to make headlines and break some expectations. I think usually people think it's the top 2-3 seeds that can really make a name for themselves, but do not sleep on this CCG roster. I think they are a sleeper to finish with that 5-0 record.
Wow, there you go. Bonfire out to the hot takes already, folks, and we've got a lot of time to cover, and he's throwing that one out already. Well, let's talk on that roster for really quickly and some of the changes that we have coming. Obviously, we still have Shocky, who arguably is the star-studded player of this squad in the top lane. You've got Hyper moving into the jungle now. You've got Rain still running the mid lane on top of Lunar in the bottom lane. The big addition, and my favorite one personally, Bonfire, Detro gets the pull up from the ACL roster, shout out to Aegis by the way, to the NACL Open Qualifiers roster in that support position. Such a big fan of what this guy's been doing for honestly a couple of splits of amateur, and I'm really excited to see how he shines on a big stage like this.
Yeah, I think it's cool that CCG obviously believes in their development system. I think there are some teams where when it comes to the open qualifiers, not pointing any fingers, but they're trying to grab up the best free agents from the market, former LCS pros. But CCG doing it the old-fashioned way, building talent through ACL and other leagues and giving them the opportunity if they perform well enough, very Cloud9 or Team Liquid-esque. And so pretty cool to see. I think Detro's earned that shot. And obviously, the people over at Rally Cry and the people making these lists believe that too, because they saw the name, they saw the rest of the squad, and they gave him the coveted number 5 slot. So I think there's a lot on Detro's shoulders, but it's not for no reason. He's a great player, and they put themselves in a position to succeed.
And certainly, if there was any amateur league that could set you up to kind of put you in a similar environment compared to the NACL Open Qualifiers, I would say it's the Aegis Champions League. I mean, most of these rosters, a good bit of these rosters that are going to be in this entire Open Qualifier circuit are playing in the ACL, including teams like Mirage Alliance, who was that number 1 seed last time. I'm pretty certain TA definitely has a roster in the ACL. I'm not 100% sure if it's the one they're running out as the number 1 seed right now in the North American Challengers League Open Qualifiers. How many times do you think we have to say that today, Bonfire? We want to set an over-under. I want to put it at like 50, but I feel like that's a little too low.
Yeah, I always just say OQs because I trip over my words, and then if I screw it up, I sound like the rooster in the Looney Tunes cartoons, where it's like I say, boy. So I try to just say OQs, but I think 50 is not a bad line, just solely for you, because there's 5 games over the next 2 days, and if you're unaware, 2 games today, 3 games tomorrow, little breaks in between. At the end of the weekend, I believe it's 16 teams that progress. I think it's 16, right? I think it halves it.
Yes.
Okay.
16 teams across the board. It's basically, you want to reach that 3-win marker. That's kind of like the vibe of this tournament. But 3 wins is certainly not what we're expecting the CCG roster to finish at. It's not what the ranking committee, like you mentioned earlier, Rally Cry, were able to drop that earlier, give us this number 5 seed. You're seed number 5th. You're not expected to only pick up 3 wins. So speaking of expectations and speaking of predictions, Bonfire, I know you already threw out the 5-0, which is a thing that only one team can do. Are you backing that through here, or are we reeling the hot takes back a little bit until we see some action?
I'm reeling it back in. I think 5-0 is a possibility, but I think more realistically, I hate to be the guy who says this. I think when you look at the top 2, TA, Mirage, I think that they just have too much experience on their roster. If CCG was ever to go against either of those 2 teams, I don't think they're able to take it. I think this is a talented team. I also think this is a team that hasn't really seen the brightest of lights yet, and so they need some time to kind of, experience losses in the big stage, and then they'll, be able to get that veteranship behind them. That being said, I'm not dropping them to 3-2 or anything lower than that. I think this is a 4-1 team. I think they're able to beat everyone lower than them. I think they lose to number 1, number 2, number 3, maybe. I still kind of favor them over Winthrop. And then, I think I have them finishing at 4-1, which is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, well, we're rolling together there, Bonfire. I definitely feel like this is also a 4-1 roster. And for everyone watching at home, I know the open qualifiers can kind of be a blitz of different details. It's honestly complete chaos behind the scenes sometimes too, because once these teams start going, you're throwing game results everyone's way, trying to figure out quickly who you're playing the next hour. But it's double points in this entire qualifier, the second one, towards that promotion tournament right now. So that will be very important to keep an eye on. But something is more important to keep an eye on: the first game draft, Bonfire. So we're here, game 1 draft, finally. CCG, the higher seed, selecting that blue side. And they're taking on a familiar squad, a familiar org in my mind, the Tempest Gaming, the 28th seed team, to kick things off.
Yeah, Tempest has honestly, you could probably do a better job talking about these players. You've seen them, you've casted them, you're aware of them. They're a bit more foreign to me, but some of these names I recognize just from being in the scene. And this is not a team to look too, down on. I do think this is a competitive roster. I think CCG should win this just based off the rankings and some of the players and the way that they play. But I do think Tempest is not a bad team, and I wouldn't honestly be surprised if they were one of the teams that ends up going 3-2 and kind of surprises a lot of people. CCG paying mind and respect to that, banning out the Amumu and the Rengar, along with the Swain, Tempest Gaming, switching over, grabbing the LeBlanc, the Milio, and the Kindred for their bans.
A lot of solid bans, a lot of meta-oriented bans out the gate. But speaking of meta-oriented, love this first pick B1 coming out here from CCG. Tristana has been dominating North American, whatever level you want to talk about, of League of Legends right now, especially with some of the new North American talents been able to pop up to the highest of leagues. Also has that flexible ability, right? You can run her mid, you could flex her towards the bottom lane. So I would assume Lunar or Rain are really excited to see exactly who gets to play the Yorda with the rocket jump. But pretty good answer back here from Tempest, a team, like you mentioned, Bonfire. I certainly have a pretty good idea about how this squad runs, and a lot of their play likes to come through Whitestone, the top lane. Not where they're going to go just yet with the draft, locking in their bottom lane, and it's just a ton of engage across the board in the support role, it seems, for this game 1.
Yeah, and both ADCs have their own way to get into fights. You obviously have the rocket jump from the Tristana. You have the ultimate from the Kai'Sa. This is very volatile, honestly, similar strategies from both of these teams so far. What I'm curious about is who's going to grab the Nocturne? Who's going to grab the Yone? Who's going to grab this follow-up in the mid and the jungle? And Renekton also not a bad shout if CCG decides to lock this in. But honestly, it's kind of a battle for who's going to get the meta champions from this composition because of how similarly both of these bot lanes are looking to be played. TPG and CCG kind of one of the same coin. Very similar strategies so far. And like I said, the Nocturne, I think, in my eyes, one of the strongest junglers to pick alongside these because of the ability to hop in, get the CC off, get a lot of damage off, and then turn the lights off. Neither team opted to go for it right now. I do think there are some other good junglers if you want to go tanky. I think the Sejuani's not a bad shout. But you want to be getting onto the back line, although neither of these teams really have a back line right now.
Not yet, right? If this Tristana certainly is going to be carried to match Caspian's Kai'Sa. Well, I guess Kai'Sa actually could be thrown mids. They're both, yeah, you're good way to look at it, Bonfire. They're kind of mirroring each other, trying to throw the similar shade each way. I'm just a big fan of Renekton on Shocky. I think Shocky's the best player. I'm going to say it all weekend long, folks, so if you get sick of it, sorry. But I think Shocky is the best player in this game by far. And Renekton is one of the best utility tools for fights, just blowing up fights right now when it comes down to that mid and late game stage. So it'll be very fun to watch Shocky there. And you were talking about junglers. I wouldn't be surprised if we just see jungler bans across the board here. Vi and Viego, the two Vs, taken away out the gate. And we're going to really see how these champ pools get narrowed for Hyper and Hani Agara.
Yeah, and there's the Sejuani ban that I was touching on. It's an incredibly strong champion. TPG also banning it because of how annoying it is to go against with Renekton, the synergy they have with how much autos you're able to get, and you're obviously able to chain the CC, and so they're gonna ban the Sejuani out. Galio ban is interesting, but it does make sense because it honestly makes the Jax nigh unkillable. It is going to be the Maokai picked up, a champion that in the past has been first picked, made its way all the way to the second phase of picks. That being said, I do think it's not nearly as good as it used to be, but it's still a very prevalent top war jungler. We are going to see it in the jungle right now. And now CCG has a decision to make. I was talking about that Nocturne before. Not really the most meta of junglers. You know where the enemy jungler is going. Where do they pivot in this jungle pick? And the Lee Sin isn't interesting.
It's calling your shot, right, Bonfire? I mean, this is Hyper saying, listen, I'm going to be creating early and often action, and you better look out for those flash kicks. But there's the other crazy part. You're talking about Maokai getting through the second stage of picks. The two champions that Detro just flashed, Nico's still on the board, and I believe that was Ari. And those two are just the cream of the crop right now when it comes to mid lane. There are players in some leagues that are banned off of both of these champions every time they queue up for a draft. That's how crazy they are right now. And the lock in the Ari, I'm a huge fan of this pick. This composition from CCG is really just a great start in my mind. But the Lee Sin is certainly the thing that sticks out. But across the board, I mean, you've got some really heavy meta that is just super strong right now, from engage to team fighting to mages. What's not to love?
Yeah, I think both these teams drafted themselves really well. I do have to tip my cap to TPG. Also, quite a lot of really good champions in their back pocket. They've got good front line. They've got good damage. I do think the biggest concern for them is the range difference. When you've got an Annie, when you've got a Jax, you really have to be on top of somebody. And that's great when you're able to have the Nature's Grasp available from the Maokai. I think they're going to have to play around that incredibly heavily, because when they drop the Nature's Grasp, you're actively looking to get on top of people, use the Annie, use the Jax to their advantage, and have the Nautilus and the Kai'Sa free hitting as well. But when they don't have that, CCG, I think, are just going to be able to outrange them. The Ari and the Tristana able to kind of keep them at an arm's distance. And so I do favor CCG in that regard. But as a whole, this isn't as lopsided as a draft, I think, as you would sometimes see with these higher seeds going for normal drafts and lower seeds. Sometimes trying to switch things up. Both of these teams going for meta, and I think kind of being pretty well-rounded.
Certainly super well-rounded, I would say. And both those AD carries we talked about, we thought could go towards the mid lane. They're both slotted into the AD carry role, so they're back to their traditional marksman roles here. It's Caspian on the Kai'Sa, and it's Lunar on the Tristana. So that will make for a very intriguing bottom lane, not only because these are two of the highest meta marksmen currently right now, but this bottom lane could kick off right when the second minion wave crashes, right? Bonfire, I mean, Tristana loves to go in early. A lot of Kaisas love to run Hail of Blades alongside that AP hybrid build to go in. And boy, do they have enough CC to back it on either side, too, if they want to start dueling.
Yeah, I think there could be battles prevalent. I also think this could be a resident sleeper bot lane. I think both of these AD carries could tell their supports, you know what, I would just prefer to scale. Lunar obviously is going to scale incredibly well on that Tristana. Talking about that range difference, it only gets better for Lunar. And then for Caspian, you could take those early trades against the Tristana, or you could just focus on, finishing laning phase with 5 CS difference, getting your upgrades, and suddenly you're a huge problem. So it just depends on, how both of these AD carries and supports feel, and if, someone oversteps. But it is true, if someone enters the laning phase with a clear difference, a clear winning advantage, that could be the game right there.
It always could be the game if that sort of plays out. It's interesting because we've two separate ideologies. Certainly at Battle, you get it in most League of Legends games, right? I mean, CCG are just chock full of a bunch of roaming mid-game capabilities and some baller team fighting when it gets down to it. TPG, Tempest Gaming, certainly want to see how they can play in the 4v4. I feel like if Tempest is going to succeed in this game, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be through White Snow, and they're just going to have him be that catalyst on the side lanes that is constantly pulling one or two people to match or try and shut him down. and win those 4v4s, 4v3s. So it'll be really intriguing to see which one of those ideologies really ends up playing out.
Yeah, I think that the Jacks cannot be left alone in the side lanes, because you kind of look at my top lane and you're like, where's my top lane? What happened? I left it unattended for 5 minutes, and suddenly I don't have any more towers. So can't leave White Snow on the top lane alone on the Jacks. But in Shocky we trust, I suppose. I do think that the Renekton is a pick that they can succeed in stunting this Jacks, and so let's hope for Shocky.
Let's all hope in Shocky, and Shocky we trust, and CCG we trust, and you can trust us that we'll be back with this game 1 in just a bit, getting through spectator delay now, so don't go anywhere, because CCG's start to the Open Qualifier second bout is in just a couple of minutes. The familiar stomping grounds of so many games today, the Open Qualifier circuit for the North American Challengers League second bout is just underway for your home team, CCG on the blue side, who've had a pretty stellar draft and are looking to make sure to quell any upset territory out the gate. And already, Tempest, oh God, we may have fireworks right out the gate. This could be disastrous for CCG.
No.
Everybody in the brush. A huge stunt coming across there for White Snow. Hyper gets knocked in the wall, and a sacrificial lamb. Detro begins. Not the way you want to start out at all. His first blood comes without even a minute on the clock.
Yeah, if it was a 5v5, maybe there's a world that CCG wins that. Detro gets a huge knock-up, and they try to chain the CC, but they were missing Lunar. Lunar was honestly doing the right thing, making sure they weren't invading bot. They brought 4. They thought for sure that would be enough. TPG doing their research. Sometimes hard work pays off when what's the saying? It's hard work pays off when talent fails or something of that sort. They did their research. They did enough. They get the first blood. And CCG starts their OQs in a bit of a hole.
And no mess-ups on giving away that kill. Either Bonfire, it lands on arguably the best person to put it on. Maybe you could argue give it a White Snow so he can get an advantage over Shocky in a decently tough lane. But Caspian getting it that early is going to be huge, not only for all that itemization, those upgrades you were talking about, but just in general to quell how this lane is going to play out. You already see the action is just continuing to roll out. Diamond Killer showing off some hooks early on there. White Snow as well, able to get a stun off there to Shocky. But main thing to watch here, Caspian has that longsword advantage. How much could that prove pivotal in this bottom lane?
Yeah, it does feel like the bot lane has to play a little bit safer because of that, although Detro didn't get the memo. Just continuing to push what he believes is their advantage. And yeah, hey, play your game, Youngblood. No reason to play scared, It's only double points in the Open Qualifiers that could mean your LCS career. So don't worry, don't sweat it, right? Also, while we have the time, gotta say, mid laner, that long, what looks like a phone number is that is Rain. If you hear us say Rain, that is going to be Rain. We just, it's NA, so everyone likes to have the funniest of the names. And I heard from our producer that is the day that they started League of Legends. And so, I'm not sure if that's correct. I believe alls, but it's kind of funny that it's not Rain. And yeah, so if you hear that, if you're unsure, just look towards the phone number.
Oh, me and Bonfire can take you through for hours about how many silly names we've seen in our casting duo career. This is far from the top of silliest names, to be honest with you. But Rain's certainly looking to make an impact, maybe have that much damage done in a game of League of Legends early on, though. Detro not able to land that stun. It does get the hook back, and a good chunk of damage dropped on by Caspian, but no real turnaround just yet. It does seem like the bottom lane prio is fervently in the hands of the CCG bot lane, despite how first blood was given over.
Yeah, it feels like Lunar's playing this really well right now, not being concerned about getting hooked because of the ability to jump away and just getting these little pokes off on the Nautilus that are kind of dissuading them from going forward. Gotta also give credit to Detro. Hyper, hold on.
Hyper double buffs level advantage is just pushing Hanigara out of the jungle, able to pick up that first Scuttle Crab as well, and in prime position here for a double scuttle. So despite the early woes, like we talked about, Hyper seemingly keeping up the tempo. And it's good to see that CCG, after making a blunder, seem to be playing the game they want to play from the get-go, regardless of how the first minute went.
Yeah, Hyper's playing very hyper right now, kind of recognizing that, yes, I am on the Lee Sin. Ooh, might be a kill potential here. Hanagara just able to get away, but Hyper gets himself a nice chicken dinner there, and I believe stole the big one.
Stole a couple of the small ones overway. There's a big stun there from Detro. Ignite over Caspian's head, so low, but not going to pop flash just yet. Safe distance. Lunar not going to flash forward either. But Detro is just continuing to zone off this TPG bottom lane and successfully set up Lunar.
Yeah, I love that play right there. I also love the fact that Lunar didn't try to push the advantage and pop in. All it takes is one root from Diamond Killer and a flash from Caspian, and suddenly a good trade turns into a bad trade and a missing flash. So Lunar just recognizing Caspian's just going to have to play super safe, super far back, maybe wait for jungle pressure. And, Lunar has the advantage without even having to burn a summoner. And Caspian kind of always has to play on the back foot until they get it back now.
Not much more killing going on just yet, but we do now see that Hanagara has roamed down. That's a hook landed onto Detro's head. Might have to spend that flash, was able to just hop away to safety. Ignite is dropped over from Diamond Killer as Hyper roams over. So once again, just a little bit of scariness, but nothing really to come of it yet. Lunar does have to be careful, though.
Ooh,
He has the minion wave with him. Hyper is in the background here. Detro is going to be able to spot out that big Nautilus. But both these junglers both want to hover, thinking the other one might jump forward for some action. But it's all just a ruse, and everybody seems like they're going to reset. Nothing going to happen.
Yeah, both junglers playing kind of the boring game of just shadowing their AD carries and supports, making sure nobody dies. I don't believe TPG had vision of Hyper there, but kind of recognizing that Lee Sin had been off the map for quite a while. And while Lee Sin might be blind, they certainly are not. They recognize the danger that the monk could provide. And so just kind of sticking behind. And then Lunar and Detroit just wanted to get one last shove in. So other than that early battle in the first blood given over, there hasn't really been a lot happening across the map. Hyper trying to get advantages for themselves and has to the tune of an 11 CS advantage. But other than that, the lanes have been fairly quiet, fairly even. Everyone's kind of feeling up the other teams. And honestly, it's the first game of League of Legends for the day for a lot of these players, you like to imagine. They want to get their fingers warmed up.
Certainly warming up pretty well. And CCG have actually pulled that gold lead pretty narrowly close back. And it's because these lanes are just really on the side of CCG in the farm department right now. You can see that Shocky was able to get a back off for free. Crash a wave, still holding about a wave's worth of a farm advantage. We've already talked about how Hyper's been scaling away camps as well, and Detro's been able to give Lunar a pretty good justification in the bottom lane. So despite that first blood, they're working forth the hard way bonfire to get themselves back into this game, and so far, paying off.
Yeah, it's done the trick. Shocky getting themselves an advantage, recognizing, hey, you've used your counter strike to get myself a good trade, and that is the reason they're up about 8 CS. Going to be more once this wave crashes. So in Shocky we trust, kind of sticking to the script, doing well in the top lane. It's obviously not the Renekton lane domination I think a lot of people expect, but you kind of do need to wait for the perfect opportunity when you're going against the Jax. If you do burn the ultimate early and the Jax doesn't use theirs, then you are in a pretty terrible position. Might go for a tower dive here, but Hanagara is there, and Hyper kind of just hold themselves, hedge their bets, back themselves off. And again, we go back to this position of neither team wants to go for a dive, wants to go for a 3v2. Both these junglers are doing a really good job of, preserving their ambiguity across the map. However, it does feel like CCG have the read that Hanagara had just backed, and so they are going to grab themselves this Rift Herald.
Yeah, great job utilizing those lane pryos across mid and top to pick up that first Rift Herald, but Tempest Gaming are going to answer with the exact cross-map play you would expect, move the bottom lane over, and we'll pick up this first Chemtech Drake, so staying pretty even down the board still, and that's got to feel nice for Tempest, who, keep in mind, are 23 seeds lower than the CCG squad in front of you.
Yeah, they also have pretty good scaling comp as well. I think that was my biggest concern looking at the draft. When we were in break, I was just kind of chatting with you and Alls, and I was saying the Lee Sin will get outscaled to the tune of it terribly. And so it does feel like Hyper hasn't done Hyper things yet. That being said, Lee Sin, I'm talking about like the 35-minute mark is when the Lee Sin's really bad. even in the mid game, it still is a very strong champion. And so it doesn't feel like the timer is completely ended yet, like a Nocturne would, or a Lucian might, in some builds. I do feel like Hyper can still be a huge issue in the mid game. But you see Hyper roaming around the map. They want to push the advantage with the Lee Sin, just haven't really been able to do so.
Been doing a good job getting that farm advantage like we talked about, matching these lanes. But yeah, Bonfire, you said it perfectly. Hasn't had too many angles for ganks just yet. We're having ultimates come online across the board here. And once again, these two junglers are mirroring each other. There goes Detro. Big Magnet Storm on top. Caspian has to use Killer Instinct to get out, but cannot get away from Lunar. Diamond with a good hook to trade Lunar right back out. But Hyper is here as well, and Rain is roaming over with Spirit Rush, goes over the wall, under the turret. Hanagara is going to find Detro, but there's the trade from Rain to find the Maokai, cuts down the tree. CCG come out on top in the bottom lane.
CCG go 2 for 1, 2 for 2. What was the final numbers right there? Because now I'm looking at the death timers. Lunar and Detro drop. It ends up being a 2 for 2, I'm hearing. My recognition not great. Hyper!
What a play from Hyper. Ward hop into the kick to finish off the kill. Knew he was dead, and he took one with him. Nilmars will have the trade, but there's a bit of the Hyper tech we expected on that Lee Sin.
Hyper becomes the Diamond Killer. Gets the kill on the Nautilus right there. Ends up going 3 for 3 in the top lane now. Hold on.
Oh my God. No chance at all. No chance at all. He popped Grandmaster at arms a little too early, and you cannot mess up against Shocky like that. Able to take that lead that we were expecting all along. And now CCG really starting to ramp up on fire. Got a comfortable gold lead to boot as well.
Yeah, kind of a blink and you miss it. 2 kills right there. I didn't even have a chance to throw it over to you. Was not aware because it's just been kind of on a hair trigger. Both of these teams going in once they see the slight bit of a miscalculation, and this is the warm-up that we were talking about. Both of these teams are starting to feel comfortable enough to push that go button, to pull the trigger, and it's to the tune of 1,500 gold difference right now. CCG coming up the victor in both of those. It is even in the kill department, but obviously with that first blood earlier in the game, it's been 3-2 or 4-3, pardon, in the kills most recently, and yeah, quite a lot's happened. I guess when you kind of step back, the big victors right now, Rain and Lunar, and Shocky as well.
Yeah, Rain, Lunar, Shocky all getting in on that action now, and they're going to keep pressing the issue here. Hyper dropping that Rift Herald. Already a couple of plates taken off the board here by Shocky as well. They'll pick up even an extra one. No. But Shelly does get caught by that minion wave. They should be able to get rid of it to get the crash, and they will. So a lot of damage done. They might actually just take first turret. Yeah, that is first turret. Secured there by Shocky. A huge gold injection, and bot side, some more death brush set up. There's a teleport, double teleport coming across. Diamond Killer on the wrong side. Good charm and blow up from Rain there. Nilmars ends up just a couple late. Lunar jumping forward, the rock jump, trying to blow Caspian up. And another bout of Spirit Rush makes sure Rain picks up a huge double kill. Nilmars can drop Tibbers all he wants, but all he'll find is a trade of the support. And it might seem like Rain isn't done. Does whip the charm and will back on up, but it's another positive play for CCG and a heads-up move from Rain.
Yeah, the double teleport was great. I honestly want to give credit over to Lunar as we take another look at this one. Look at how Lunar plays this one out. I'm very impressed because when you're on this Tristana, it does kind of feel like you're in a terrible position sometimes. You hop in, do you not hop in? Lunar just says, you know what, screw it. We can live to die another day. I'm going in. Hops in right there, and then this is the one I'm most impressed on. Hops directly on the Caspian, negates that range advantage, and then flashes to get that, hops themselves away. It's very impressive from Lunar. Someone who we haven't really talked about. We've talked about Hyper. We've talked about Shocky. We've even had our conversations about Rain, but Lunar deserves their roses. They are a very good AD carry, and showing that tech off, that micro play on the Tristana, just no fear, and recognizing their advantage, getting the kills, hopping themselves away, and 1-1-3 on this Tristana right now.
Yeah, really starting to scale up. Already has that Kraken completed just to shred this decently tanky front line the Tempest have created themselves. But speaking back on Rain, 3-0-1, the only one on the server side with a bounty right now, and looking to maybe pick off more. There's the Nature's Grasp. They're looking to turn this on to CCG, and they just blow up Diamond Killer. Caspian will pick up that kill. Hyper in the middle of everybody hits the Gore Drinker and sets Lunar up for a good trade. And here comes Rain. Massive charm on the backline. Huge Everfrost as well. CCG are just wiping the floor with Tempest, and it's all to the tune of Rain. Nilmars will pick up a double kill on the back end, but Rain has a couple more charges of Spirit Rush, and it's Shocky to find the final kill. An ace from CCG at 14 minutes.
Beautifully played from Rain and Shocky. Let's take another look at that one because it was so nice. Had to see it twice. CCG, first ace of the OQs. It starts a little dicey. It's 5 members all on Hyper, but he says we take those. I do not mind being in the middle, and then Rain just destroying their back line. Lunar falls and ends up being a 2-on-2, but again, Rain and Shocky, just the perfect buddy. They're stepbrothers. They feel so comfortable together. They're able to close this one off. Everyone does their job, and it's just perfectly played out. But that might not be the only fight we see here because the respawn timers were allowed to be taken, and now it's going to be another 5-for-5.
Yeah, that Infernal Drake is up, and Shocky's going to just jump right on it here. It seems like CCG feel they are still stronger in this 5v5.
Oh.
Huge flash, double Magnet Storm. Detro, are you kidding me? Completely blows up Caspian and Hanimura, and that's all she wrote, folks. Lunar will pick up the double kill, but hats off to Detro as CCG win another big fight.
Slayer, can you hear that, Slayer? That's the sound of the snowball rolling because this one feels like it could be over soon, especially with Baron in their with Baron in their eyes. I believe it's up. No, it's Herald up right now. They're just destroying them so much right now. 14-8 in terms of the kills, 6,000 in terms of the gold. That I didn't even realize it was 16 minutes. Unbelievable stuff. And we talked about that scaling on Lunar and on Rain. They are putting themselves in a good position to scale even harder with the kills. Rain and Shocky, though, those are the two that I want to highlight right now. 4-0-4 on this Renekton, 5-0-5 on this Ahri. Just doing an incredible job of creating their own advantages, and they're just going to continue to do so.
Ooh, and Lunar is going to have a little bit of a solo bout of himself. Nilmars gets litmus tested there by Lunar and finds another kill for CCG. So a game that started really shaky Bonfire has finally shifted back to the expected results so far. You mentioned the gold lead. CCG have really taken over their first game of OQs.
Yeah, honestly, and you say it was shaky. I say that they were just kind of feeling their opponents out. You know, tomato. It did feel like they were playing a little more scared than they normally do. It did feel like they just didn't really have the ganks that they would normally get. But you said it perfectly. They're warmed up now. They've got those jitters out of the way, whether it was nerves, whether it was shakiness, whether it was, I don't know, the sun was in their eyes, the wind was too much. It doesn't matter because right now they're playing the CCG way. This is the game that they want to play, and that's kind of all you want to do when you're in this position is play the game that you do in scrims. Do not be baited into playing the enemy's game, and that's exactly what they're doing.
And they're going to keep rolling towards mid. Good hook there from Diamond Killer, but Detro certainly isn't the target you want to pick there. Second bout of Shelly secured here by Hyper, and that's going to be the mid turret locked down. But Rain wants more. 2 bouts of Spirit Rush forces the flash out of Hanigara. And you can see just how much respect is given over to this CCG squad, moving all 5 forward. They get a second bout of Shelly. There's a big hook onto Shocky, but they're going to turn the tides right back onto that Nautilus. Hanigara has to run for the hills. Rain able to zone Caspian, and Nautilus has to be careful who he hooks because he'll pay the price with a gray screen.
Yeah, the Diamond Killer has to get themselves away, but just not able to do so. Trying to start and engage, but Lunar knocks down the tower, and so the 6th member, which was the tower, falls too quickly, and suddenly there's just nothing that they can do. And at this point, it is a 9,000 gold difference between these two teams. It does feel like TPG have just kind of been stopped in their tracks. Every single play that they want to do is just always being flipped over to being CCG favored. And a lot of these fights that were, only 2 members or 3 members standing afterwards from CCG are suddenly starting to feel a lot more comfortable. And it does feel like this one could be wrapped up fairly soon. It is only 18 minutes, so they're going to have to cross their T's and dot their I's and, do everything, take a Baron, get some more dragons, scale up a little bit more, maybe a couple more team fight wins. But at 9,000 at 18.5 minutes, this game kind of feels like it's as good as done.
Certainly the way CCG have played these last 10 minutes, it feels like we are nearing that nail in the coffin moment regardless. They're starting to split the pushes up here as well, trying to knock down as many turrets as possible. White Snow already getting pushed off that secondary tower in the top lane. And it's just smooth sailing so far. The macro really on point here. No Baron even up yet for them to pick off, but Hyper might get picked off here. Good hop over the wall. Nature's Grasp won't catch any members of CCG, so Hyper might have overextended, but won't pay the price in the end.
Yeah, I don't want to flame Hanagara, but a lot of these Nature Grasp have gone wide, whether that's credit to Hyper and Shocky for being able to dodge out of them, or Hanagara just kind of not finding the kills or the ultimates that he wants, but just doesn't feel like Nature Grasp has been as impactful as an ultimate as I was talking about it in draft. And I mean, honestly, it could be make or break for a lot of these team fights. If you can get it onto the front line, if you're able to get a pick off and chain the CC, that could be the difference between winning and losing a fight. And just it felt like a lot of them have gone wide so far.
Yeah, just haven't been able to capitalize on anything yet, but they are stacking up to try and pick off Rain. But out of every member you could try and pick off on this CCG comp, and Fed Ari is probably the last one you want to try and go against. And now, on the spawn with Baron, CCG are just jumping right on it. They have thrown all caution to the wind. It's going to take a while for them to burn this down. Curious if they even want to 50-50 this, but Hyper and Lunar are just two-manning it to death. Look at the zoning from CCG, just keeping Tempest away. That hook will go wide, and there's the engage from Ditro. Huge turn, tons of big stuns, and Everfrost across the board. Lunar's unstoppable jumping forward. Caspian has nowhere to go but forward and will drop forward. A triple, nearly a quadra kill for Lunar. All that's left is White Snow. He'll turn and find a desperate plea for a kill, but it's a quadra for Lunar. Wow, CCG blow up the game.
Yeah, and that was beautifully played from CCG, just chaining their ultimates. They didn't even have the Lee Sin and the Tristana initially there, but they hopped in. They recognized the team was there beside them. Hopefully, we can get a replay going because I want to see that engage from the rel. It's unbelievable as we dive over to it. So the Lee Sin and the Tristana aren't there, but the recognition and the team play, they just know that they have them in a fantastic position, and then beautiful play from the rel, gets the stun, they just dive in, they get the CC chains available. Unbelievable work, and again, it's just beautifully played. And honestly, this one, there's great micro play, there's great macro play. This one, I want to chalk up to great communication, recognizing where everybody in the team is, where the ultimate is, where they have everybody corralled into. You have to imagine that they just sound like the stock exchange, just constantly yelling, you know, we're up, we're down, buy now, sell here, and everybody's recognizing the jobs that they have to do. The Wolf of Wall Street in that Baron.
Well, they're all just shouting buy, and we're up, because there's very little further this team could go up by this point. They're up nearly 15,000 gold with Baron pushing into these inhibitor turrets, going to knock the base open. Another hook forward for Diamond Killer, but yeah, you land that, you might pay your life as the price has to flash out. Shocky playing the 4-1 split beautifully. You can just see the red base is all for the taking. There is a little Tempest can even do. They'll have to go for some sort of last-ditch effort by this point if they want to try and stop the snowball. They don't go in just yet. They sacrifice 2 inhibitors as CCG continue to macroly eviscerate this squad. Hyper, though, has to be careful.
No,
brings Hanagara over the wall, though, and gets him blown up. Ditro now alone in the red base. Will be there for the trade, but here comes Shocky. Goes with the stopwatch to keep himself safe. He is dominating as he slays White Snow once more. Huge forward by Hyper. The kick does land, but the Zanias keeps Nalmars alive. Rain with a huge storm, and here comes Lunar forward, and it's an absolute evisceration. Another ace for CCG, and this game is already over, folks. They're on to the Nexus turrets. What a start for CCG this weekend.
23 minutes, blink and you miss it type of game. They do everything they need to do to secure themselves that game 1 victory. Sometimes one of the most volatile games. A lot of times you hear competitors talk about when you have that first game, that's the scariest game because you never know what your opponent's going to throw out. It could be anything. And they just recognize that they feel comfortable enough in their team comp. They feel warmed up at this point. They avoid that early test. They get themselves that game 1 win. They move to the undefeated pool. It's all coming up CCG right now this Saturday afternoon.
Well, you know what I've got to say, Bonfire? I want to issue a challenge, to be honest, to the rest of the open qualifiers because I'm willing to bet CCG just had the quickest game To start out the weekend. No, I mean, it
Okay.
certainly has to be out there. This team looked absolutely stellar. And, you talk about all the best performers. It's honestly the entire team, Bonfire. I mean, looking across the stats here, Lunar is the one that pops out the most, 13, 2, and 10 with a game high 18,000 damage. The funniest part, though, Bonfire, is when you hear 18K damage in a game, you're usually thinking, oh, is that what the support did in the game? Is that the added damage that maybe a Maokai jungle ended up doing? No, that's just how fast of this game when it was that 18,000 damage is all Lunar really needed to do.
Yeah, it felt like Lunar was in a great position to carry and just didn't need to the extent of, obviously heavy carry. As a whole, big ups to Lunar, big ups to honestly the entire team. Everyone played so well together. I obviously made that stock exchange reference earlier, but it does feel like that's exactly what it was. It was just 5 people looking to make it rich and play together, and maybe scamming out the little man. And that's exactly what they did. They scammed the little man. TPG, I'm sorry you've been swindled, and you're about to fall like the 2008 recession.
Oh man, they got them to buy a house with that first blood bonfire, and then they just eviscerated them after that. Well, all economy jokes, yeah, I can't believe we're making those aside. Great start here for CCG as they'll take a very well-deserved 1-0 lead. That unfortunately though does mean that we're going to a pretty extended break here. We have no idea who the next opponent is. That's the beauty of Swiss. We'll see exactly who's next up. Make sure to stay locked to the CCG Twitter to see the next opponent down the line. Make sure to stay on the Twitch channel to see when we come back. The next game is slotted for 3 p.m. Eastern, but that could start a little bit earlier or a little bit later. So you know what that means, Bonfire?
That means I have time to make myself a sandwich in between games?
Yes, but that does mean that everybody at home better have this Twitch channel still up and open to see when our 2 beautiful mugs pop back on. But for now, we'll take that extended break. Go make yourself some food like Bonfire, and we'll be back here and hopefully sometime soon with Game 2 of the Open Qualifiers for CCG.